This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, a very special episode with a very special guest. We are honored to have with us this evening Trevor Loudon. He is an author, speaker, and political activist, and he is the writer and director of the new documentary, The Enemies Within. It's an expose on the growing communist and Muslim Brotherhood influence in America's government. Trevor Loudon, what an honor and a privilege to have you on the Glazov Gang.
Look, thanks very much for having me, Jamie. It's great to be on.
Trevor, I watched your documentary the other day, just absolutely superb. And I guess another word we can use is horrifying. All of these things that you're bringing up, just fact after fact after fact. And what is so catastrophically tragic is that this is almost never in our media. And so I want to discuss these things with you this evening. And we made our episode tonight a little bit longer so we can get some of these truths out. You just did a superb job, Trevor. Thank you for getting the truth out. Before we begin to talk about this film, give us a little bit of background about yourself so our viewers, those of our viewers who don't know you, can get to know you a little bit.
Well, thanks, Jamie. I'm from New Zealand, but I've been researching the US left and the radical movements for more than 20 years now. I was the first guy to connect the Hawaiian communist Frank Marshall Davis with the young Barack Obama, and also exposed Van Jones, Obama's communist green job czar, and Glenn Beck used that information to get him kicked out of the White House. So I've got two books, The Enemies Within, Communists, Socialists, and Progressives in the US Congress, and Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. So I basically look at the communist and socialist infiltration into mainstream American politics and how that works in with Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood, and how they basically work hand in glove to bring this country down.
Thank you, Trevor. Now, at the risk of repetition, but just to amplify this now, what specifically inspired you to make this film, The Enemies Within?
Well, it started really when Alan West out of Florida was criticized for saying there were 80 communists in Congress. And he wasn't really right. He was hammered for that. And had he actually known the backgrounds of these people, he could have come out on the attack and said, well, I was actually being a bit light. So that fired me up. I thought, well, people need to understand that because the US Congress has no background checks for service, no background checks to serve on the Intelligence Committee or the Armed Services Committee or the Homeland Security Committee, your enemies have deliberately infiltrated their sympathizers into your Congress. Look, you need a security background check, an FBI check to drive a school bus in America or sell stamps at the post office or be a realtor. But you don't need one to serve on the Intelligence Committee of the House of Representatives or the Homeland Security Committee or the Armed Services Committee or any other powerful committee in the U.S. House. And that has created problems.
Absolutely. Something almost never discussed by Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow, that's for sure. Let us begin now. In general, as an introduction, tell us about the enemies within.
You know, if you look at someone like Valerie Jarrett, who's Obama's closest advisor, her grandfather was a Communist Party front activist. Her father was a Communist Party front activist. Her father-in-law was a Communist Party member, as was her mother-in-law. And many of them worked in Chicago with a man called Frank Marshall Davis, who just happened to go out to Hawaii and ended up mentoring the young Obama. Now, isn't it strange that those two people should end up working together in the White House with that long-time connection? But what I'm saying is you've got a couple of small communist parties in America. You've got the Communist Party USA, a few thousand members. You've got Democratic Socialists of America, maybe 7,000 members. But they have taken over control of the American labor movement. They did that from 1995 onwards. And if you control the American labor movement, you have a lot of influence in the Democratic Party. You can decide who gets funded, who doesn't get funded. You can decide which policies are promoted, who gets selected for a congressional seat, who doesn't. So those few thousand communists have used that leverage to basically get their sympathizers into your Congress and to get their policies enacted, whether it's a nuclear deal with Iran, whether it's Obamacare or the gutting of your military or immigration amnesty. A few thousand communists are basically forcing their policies down the throats of 300 million Americans, and they are working with various Muslim Brotherhood fronts like CARE, ISNA, ICNA, Muslim American Association, Muslim Students Association, working in partnership to influence your congressman, to control your congressman, and force their policies down America's throats.
Yes, Trevor, and apparently this is not important. What is important is a joke that, maybe Trump said in private 10 years ago, or some woman's feelings that he hurt 20 years ago in terms of her weight or something. I mean, this is what the media is focusing on. Trevor, in your documentary, and even right now, what you're summarizing for us, a real theme here, major theme, the takeover of the Democratic Party by the radical left, and we could even say communists. David Horowitz has documented this brilliantly over the years in one of his books, The Shadow Party, other books, and you, of course, in your work, in your books, and also in this film. This Democratic Party, look, we used to have John F. Kennedy. We used to have these Democrats that actually liked America. When we saw Hillary Clinton give that speech at the convention, I will say even my own family that's escaped from the Soviet Union, our jaws dropped. I mean, these were texts taken right out of Lenin and Stalin and Castro. I encourage our readers to read Daniel Greenfield's article, Communist Party USA, when he covered Clinton's speech. Trevor, these are communist principles being articulated by the candidate running for president for the Democratic Party. What happened to this party?
Well, look, it's always been a target for infiltration by the radical left, but they were kept at bay in some ways by the moderate wing of the Democratic Party. 10 years ago, there were 80 or 90 members of the Blue Dog Coalition, which was the center-right Democrats. Now there are 15. A few years ago, there were 20 members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Now there are 80. That's set up by Democratic Socialists of America. The whole of the Democratic Party at the top is now controlled by the radical left. There are no significant policy differences between those of the Communist Party USA and those of the Democratic Party. None whatsoever. If you want to know what the Democrats are going to do tomorrow, read the Communist Party's People's World Today. I knew there was going to be a nuclear deal with Iran because the Communist Party was talking about it 2 years ago in their own paper. And then you see Obama bring it up. You see Kerry bring it up. They are following the communist line to a T.
And Trevor, sorry, you can continue. I'll just get this in here. You talk about Bernie Sanders in your documentary. I mean, look, we've got Bill Maher that brings on Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders is such a hero and such a nice guy. When is somebody like Bill Maher going to ask the right questions? As you point out, as we know, those of us who study this, I mean, Bernie Sanders worshipped Castro, the Sandinistas. He visited the Soviet Union. He was a fan of the evil empire that massacred millions of people. This is a communist worshipping communist monstrosities.
Look, Bernie Sanders has always worked with the communist movement. He supported groups like the PLO and the Quebec separatists. He has always been a hardcore Marxist-Leninist. He was put in place by a combination of the Communist Party and Democratic Socialists of America. He's always worked with them, but he calls himself a democratic socialist, a progressive. Well, the difference between Bernie Sanders' form of democratic socialism and full-on communism is about 5 to 10 years.
Trevor, tell us about Tim Kaine.
Well, Tim Kaine has been sold to the American public as this moderate Democrat. He would be a counterbalance to Hillary Clinton's extremism. He will appeal to the moderate Democrats out there, the many moderate Democrats. Tim Kaine comes from the liberation theology school of Catholicism. He spent time in Honduras, mixed with extreme radicals there, even traveled into Nicaragua to meet with a Marxist priest, made a special trip to do so. He has always followed that extreme left wing of the Catholic religion, but he is also heavily indebted to the Muslim Brotherhood in Virginia. It was MAS, the Muslim American Society, that basically got him elected as governor by signing up 65,000 new Muslim voters. He worked very closely with Marty Bray, an open Hamas supporter and the leader of MAS, a close fellow traveler of the Workers' World Party, no less, that supports North Korea and Iran, and also worked with Dr. Issam Omesh, another virulently anti-Israel Muslim Brotherhood supporter. When he was exposed, Kaine had to fire him because his views were so extremely anti-Israel. But Kaine has not let up. He has worked, he's disrespected Israel. He refused to attend Netanyahu's speech last year, and he has been very actively involved in preventing any efforts to prevent Islamic refugees coming into this country. He's been a big champion of increased Islamic resettlement in this country and settlement in this country, which follows completely the Muslim Brotherhood line, which he has been financed by, supported by, and worked with for many years.
Trevor, I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk about that for a minute. Again, you do this so powerfully in The Enemies Within. Okay, we've got Hillary Clinton running to be president, and you've got people that come up to Hillary, theoretically, let's just say, they come up to Hillary and say, Obama's letting in, about 10,000 in terms of just Syrian refugees alone. Now, Miss Clinton, these people from this environment support Sharia law. They hate the United States. They hate freedom. Their ideology hates women, believes in the subjugation of women, believes in the subjugation of all unbelievers. Many of them could be jihadists. ISIS is boasting that it's infiltrated these refugees with its own terrorists. What do you think? Let's increase it by 550%. What's this all about? How could somebody want to increase the immigration of a population that hates America by 550%? It's 10,000 right now. She wants to make it 65,000. And when Trump says that this woman's got hatred in her heart, I think he hit bingo. Open our eyes about what it takes to believe this and want to pursue it.
Look, I think Hillary Clinton does have hatred in her heart. Look, this is a woman who was mentored by Saul Alinsky, who learned his dirty tactics from the Chicago mob and the Chicago Communist Party. She worked under Ted Truhaft and Doris Bryn Walker in their communist law firm in San Francisco, one of her first internships. She has worked with Marxists her entire life. When she was in the White House, she was helping Bill to sell U.S. military technology to the Chinese in exchange for campaign donations. While she was while she was Secretary of State, her Clinton Foundation was partnering with the Skolkovo Foundation in Russia, which is the Russian Silicon Valley, funded by the Russian government, and the FBI accused them of basically funneling American military technology to Vladimir Putin's war machine. She has got a woman as her chief assistant, Huma Abedin, who has extensive Muslim Brotherhood family connections. She was herself a Muslim Brotherhood front activist with the Muslim Students Association, And according to WikiLeaks, this woman would be Hillary Clinton's Secretary of State.
Now, Trevor, I mean, this is just a catastrophic picture here. And so, look, we got to do the math here. In terms of just this Syrian refugee issue alone, you're bringing in refugees and increasing the number of refugees from an environment that hate America, worship and venerate and follow an ideology that hates freedom, hates unbelievers, hates women, wants to subjugate them, full of jihadists. But here's another thing. So it's the destruction of America. They want to destroy America to build their classless utopia on its ashes. Something else is going on here too. When you're bringing in all these populations, the anti-American populations, you increase the plantation on which you enslave everyone and get votes. And you bring up in the enemies within that if Hillary wins this time, in terms of what they're doing demographically here, we're headed towards a one-party state. This is terrifying.
Well, you tell me if my math is incorrect here. You know, Hillary Clinton has promised to legalize all of the illegal immigrants within 100 days. Now, that is anywhere between 12 and 40 million people. Now, Mitt Romney lost the last election by 2.5 million votes approximately. Now, we know that the illegal immigrants, most of the Latino population, when they get citizenship and voting rights, they go about 75 to 80% Democrat. So working on that ratio, amnesty will give the Democrats anywhere between 10 and 32 million new votes.
Wow.
Now Texas will go blue, Florida will go blue, Georgia will go blue. There will never be another Republican president, ever. So you imagine how arrogant the Democrats are now with some opposition. What are they going to be like with no opposition whatsoever? What check will there be on their agenda? You know, and just to go back to the Islamic refugees, when I came to this country, I had to swear that I'd never been involved in any communist or Nazi organization that sought to overthrow the US Constitution. That was my declaration for coming here. If you're an Islamic refugee who believes in Sharia law, you believe in overthrowing the US Constitution. You should be denied entry on those grounds alone.
Thank you, Trevor. Look, from one catastrophic horror movie to another, Stephen Coughlin wrote a book, Catastrophic Failure. Everybody get it. Catastrophic failure it is. He documents something you also document in your film, Trevor. Look, we know that the Muslim Brotherhood approached the Obama administration through its front groups in 2011, 2012, and they said, let's see your FBI training manuals. Let's see the CIA training manuals. Took the manuals, they let them see it, came back and said, take out these things. They took out like 1,000 points out of these intelligence agency manuals, training manuals. And the Obama administration agreed. No references to Islam allowed, no references to jihad, radical Islam, etc., etc. This is now, picture in the Cold War that we're trying to fight communism, but we're not allowed to think of communism or think of the KGB or anything like that. We're not allowed to discuss it. In your documentary, you reveal that FBI agents are actually being punished now if they're actually trying to pursue anything to do with the threat of Islamic supremacism.
Exactly. We documented several cases, people like John Guandalo, but it's not just the FBI. We document a military contractor who was thrown out of his job because he dared to point out that a Muslim Brotherhood man was instructing US troops about to go to Afghanistan on how to deal with the Muslims there. We talked to Philip Haney of the Department of Homeland Security, who was persecuted for years, whose files were purged because he dared to actually identify terrorists. So Americans have got this idea that their FBI is looking out for them and their CIA is on the case and Department of Homeland Security is watching the bad guys. Look, all of those agencies are penetrated by the bad guys. They've purged the training manuals. They're binding people's hands. America's intelligence agencies have been co-opted by the enemies. Now, how frightening is that? But the reality is that is the truth.
Oh boy. Look, something else you bring up. After the Holy Land Foundation trial and, other things that had happened, it had become clear that CARE and other Muslim Brotherhood front groups were connected and linked to terror, period. And an investigation should have started into these groups. Eric Holder shut these investigations down. How could somebody that wants the security of the United States shut down the investigation of groups that are trying to hurt America?
This is the man who once led an armed invasion of the principal's office of Columbia University. This is a man who was mentored by Percy Sutton, the friend of the Saudi agent. Look, I've just forgotten his name. Sorry, but the point is, Eric Holder has part of the Obama administration, and the Obama administration has a pro-Islamic, pro-communist agenda. It's the fox is guarding the hen house. Of course they're going to protect their buddies. You've got a whole bunch of Democratic congressmen who regularly take money from CARE and ISNA and MASS, who go to their functions, talk at their events, push their legislation. Like John Conyers from Michigan, the senior Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. When Republicans tried to get the Muslim Brotherhood banned, or designated a terrorist organization, John Conyers, who's got a Communist Party history that goes back 50 years, worked like crazy to get that shut down, to close it all down, called the Muslim Brotherhood a peace-loving social service agency. And so you've got this going, well, you've got the FBI. Their budget comes from the House Judiciary Committee. Their priorities come from the House Judiciary Committee. What do you think would happen to their budget if they ever came after John Conyers or his many pro-Muslim Brotherhood comrades in Congress? So the FBI is hamstrung here.
Yeah. Trevor, I thought that I was scared when I was 11 alone in the house when it was dark watching The Exorcist. But I was more scared recently in watching your documentary and digesting UN Resolution 1618. We have an effort now, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, also called the Organization of Islamic Conference, OIC, these 57 Muslim states. Hillary's working close with them, or countries, and they're going to illegalize criticism / truth-telling about Islam. Hillary has promised to go along with this. What this basically means is if they get what they want and Hillary's on board, it will eventually be illegal to say anything truthful about Islam.
Exactly. The conversation we've been having tonight would put us both in jail. Now, how does that reconcile with your First Amendment? This is the left loves hate speech legislation because it shuts down debate. They can accuse anybody who criticizes any organization. They can accuse them of being a racist or a bigot and make them criminally liable. UN Resolution 1618, which Hillary Clinton has invited into the State Department, which Hillary Clinton has actively promoted for the last several years through her job as Secretary of State, will become the law of the land. Criticism of Islam, and as you understand, that's not saying bad things about Islam, that's saying the truth about Islam, because to a Muslim, defamation is just anything that might hurt their feelings.
Or that they're uncomfortable with.
Anything they're uncomfortable with. So, you imagine if America had that kind of legislation when you were fighting for your lives in the revolution, you couldn't offend, King George. You couldn't offend the British because that might hurt their feelings. Right. You would have to be thrown in jail. This is tyranny on steroids. And people do not realize what would happen to this country if Hillary Clinton became president, because your freedom of speech will go completely out the window.
Well, wait a minute, Trevor. Freedom of speech going out the window, Trump hurting a woman's feelings about her weight. I don't know. It's all pretty equal to me. Trevor, some people feel like just throwing up their hands, giving up, getting depressed, hiding in a corner somewhere, thinking about moving somewhere to Antarctica or something. I don't know. But there are some things we can do. One thing I want to talk about definitely in a minute is where, first of all, let's get the information out. I think we got to get the enemies within the DVD into every American citizen's hands. We're going to talk about that in 1 second, how we can do that. But you give us hope by saying that every American citizen should support House Resolution 3892.
3892, House Resolution 3892, which is, and there's a companion piece in the Senate as well, backed by Ted Cruz. That one law would designate the Muslim Brotherhood in this country as a terrorist organization, as it is in most overseas countries. That would shut down CARE, ISNA, IGNA, MAS, Muslim Students Association overnight. It would mean that they cannot work with your State Department, your police forces, your FBI, your education departments. They could not work with your congressmen and senators and presidents, and they could not work with your executive branch, your Justice Department. That would shut down 60 years of Muslim Brotherhood infiltration overnight without a shot being fired. That would be the single most effective thing you could do to get rid of this pernicious influence in your country. And that could pass in the next Congress. That would pass under a Donald Trump presidency. But there's no way it's going to pass under a Clinton presidency. She will empower the Muslim Brotherhood like you have never seen before.
Absolutely. And Trevor, there's always this aura now in the air when this discussion is taking place that something very inappropriate is being planned, like the background checks of House representatives and senators. Oh, so racist, so insensitive. It's incredible how this Muslim Brotherhood leftist brainwashing has occurred, that even in my life, when I've moved into several buildings, I remember there were background checks. We have background checks when people get jobs or try to buy guns. But background checks for senators, congressmen, very insensitive. A lot of brainwashing has occurred, right? Just the fact that we have to apologize for a background check for our leaders.
From Indiana, the congressman, who has extensive ties to Muslim Brotherhood fronts and operatives, who is very anti-American in his rhetoric and his behavior. Why should that man be allowed to serve on the Intelligence Committee of the House of Representatives, overseeing all 16 of your intelligence agencies? Do you think the Iranians would allow a pro-American to oversee their intelligence agency? Do you think the Russians would allow a pro-American to oversee the KGB?
Trevor, sometimes I think let's say somebody was going to lead this country and we found out that one of their main assistants, let's say the person they listen to most, their father is a member of the Ku Klux Klan and has, posters of the KKK all over his room. You would think that you might ask that person what he thinks about his father and his father's views. Let's say somebody was advising the president and had a poster of Adolf Hitler in his room, and there was a book of, the Mein Kampf was on his dinner table. You would think that maybe we should ask this person what they think about their father. Huma Abedin's mother, just forget even all the other issues about Huma Abedin. Her mother has translated and edited a book supporting jihad and Sharia law. Name me one time Huma Abedin was asked what she thinks about her mother's views.
Well, she will never be asked while the current media is dominating and the current administration is dominant. The left can be great at this sort of stuff. You remember what they told us about Mitt Romney and what he did with his dog on holiday, about allegedly beating up some young gay kid when he was 17. They went through Sarah Palin's kids' Facebook pages because it was all a question of character. The American public had a right to know the background of those who would lead them. That's true if you're a Republican. If you're a Democrat, you can have any amount of skeletons in your closet. You can have an elephant's graveyard of skeletons in your closet, and the media will leave you alone. They will cover for you and absolutely exonerate you. So this is a huge double standard, and this is what we're fighting against here. And I think this election has thrown that into stark relief.
Huma Abedin might be Secretary of State or Chief of Staff. She's connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, where can you make this stuff up? And the media does not discuss this except for a few brave people like Hannity on Fox News. Trevor Loudon, thank you so much for being such a noble truth teller in our world today. Let's just begin with this. Where can viewers, number one, watch this film?
Well, we are going to do some theater releases after the election, but right now the best way to get it's on DVD. Just go to enemieswithinmovie.com. enemieswithinmovie.com. You go there, you can see a short trailer. You can order the movie online, and you can order multiple copies too. We want several million people to see this before the election, and we will soon have it up on pay-per-view, the normal pay-per-view channels as well, on Amazon, etc. But right now, just go to enemieswithinmovie.com, the easiest place to get it.
Enemieswithinmovie.com. Ladies and gentlemen, go there and order 40, 50 DVDs. Give them to all of your friends, even your enemies. Go to the grocery store, to the local gym, anywhere you can go, and start passing them out. Is that a good idea, Trevor?
That's a great idea. I think give them to your Democrat friends, give them to your Republican friends, but most of all, give them to your friends who don't vote, because this is one election we cannot afford to sit out. And I guarantee you, if your friend sits down and watches this movie right through, they will vote. They will realize the absolute criticality of this coming election.
Trevor, one final point before we go. I can't help from thinking about this. Where are you from?
New Zealand.
Okay. You're from New Zealand. I'm from Russia. My producer, Annie Cyrus, a hero from Iran. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that there's Americans fighting for their country, but there's a lot of Americans sitting on their couch, and it's the immigrants that are fighting for America in many cases. What's going on?
Well, that's right. Look, we have all lived under some form of socialism or tyranny. I've lived under the very soft tyranny of New Zealand. You've lived under the harsher tyranny, and your producer has certainly lived under tyranny. And we know the language. We know how these people speak. We know their agendas. And we can see these politicians in America speaking this way. And so we've all come from somewhere else to get freedom. And we have nowhere left to go. If freedom goes in America, it's done everywhere. And most Americans, they live in the freest, richest, most prosperous country the world has ever seen. They're benevolent people, they're kind people, but that breeds a certain amount of complacency and a certain amount of naivety. They do not understand evil, and they do not understand evil in their own government. That is a hard stretch for most Americans. Not so hard for an Iranian, not so hard for a Russian, but it's hard for most of middle America to accept. So I think that they need us, Jamie, to sort of sound the alarm to some degree.
Yeah. Trevor Loudon, you are a scholar and a gentleman and a hero and a great noble man. Thank you for everything you do.
Look, very much appreciated, Jamie. It's great to be on with you. Big admirer of your work and what David Horowitz has done. None of this would be possible without your organization.
Thank you, Trevor. And the viewers of this show, you should be thinking of nothing else right now but getting The Enemies Within. You can get it at theenemieswithinmovie.com. Get 50 copies and start distributing them everywhere. If you like this program, please go to jamieglazov.com to support the show. We're a fan-generated program. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel of the Glazov Gang. We'll see you soon. Good night.